Hi everyone, Sean Healy, Change Agent here. Welcome to the Relationship Resourcing Series, a series designed to support people in their business and personal relationships with tools and strategies and understanding. Today's episode, fun one today. We're looking at it. The episode is entitled Embracing Shame. We're looking at elements of shame, and ideally, shame can be so painful when we have attacks of shame. It can be so debilitating, and we're looking at how do we have that experience and still move forward regardless. I can assure you, as someone who struggled with shame attacks all my life, if I didn't develop a strategy for doing it anyway, I wouldn't be getting much done, I can assure you. So it's particularly challenging when talking about shame and being seen. I've done a podcast series on this before, but it's different when you're also being looked at whilst talking about shame. For those of you, if you want a reference for a shame attack, either for yourself or others, what happens is, we get that sinkingness in the pit of the stomach. We get burning hot with that embarrassed, humiliated sense. Our cheeks go bright red, and there's almost a sense of age regression. We become a little girl and a little boy again. And toxic shame is just so dreadful and so painful to experience, and can really stop us from putting ourselves out into the world. It can stop us from having quality relationships. It can stop us from succeeding with our business visions and desires. I've certainly met many people who this would be an underpinning of the fear of success. People are terrified about how shaming it would be to succeed, not be able to hold on to that success and lose it, and then, what would people think of me? I'd be so humiliated. I'd feel so shameful and embarrassed because I lost everything. These things can really get in the way of us, fulfilling and living our dreams, and we really deserve to. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about shame. There's a lot to say about shame, but I thought we'd just do a bit of an episode today on it, just to offer some insight and some gentle ways in which to kind of manage it when it appears. So the idea of shame itself, in essence, drops down into three subcategories. The first is the idea of what we might term healthy shame. This is where, we feel some adverse response, perhaps if we've behaved in a way that's not necessarily consistent with our values or with social values. The idea around the feelings of shame from a healthy perspective was this keeps us part of the tribe, so to speak. It modifies our behavior in ways, and so from the days when we were hunters and gatherers and tribalistic, and we also were potentially on the menu, shame was an element that helped ensure our survival, because isolation from the group would have meant certain death. So it had a kind of a link to biological value, that if we felt shame around how we behaved and we weren't complying with the group, then this was potentially life-threatening. And again, it's funny when sometimes people use language like, I nearly died of shame. It can be so powerful when we experience it. But the important thing to note is that it is a feeling. That's and from an element of a more healthy experience with shame, we're able to keep the experience contained to a feeling. That's what it is. It's not who we are, it's what we are feeling in the moment. Toxic shame is where we collapse that feeling and our identity together. So I don't feel like I've done something wrong. Instead, I am wrong. That's toxic shame. That feeling that I am wrong. And this is where, again, when we're looking at shame and we're looking at healthy shame, which is when we're just having a feeling about something, to the kind of branches of this where we go into the different expressions of toxic shame, one way to manage toxic shame and that sense that I am wrong is I start to show up in the world as this kind of superhuman, perfectionistic, over-functioning type individual. Or on the other side, I go into this subhuman, worm-like, less than experience, and that's how I will manifest that sense of toxic shame through myself, that sense that I am wrong. So we can find that people deal with shame in very, very different ways. Some people become chronic achievers to try to avoid it, have to show up looking their absolute best, both in terms of their physicality and the clothes that they wear, what they drive, how they present themselves in the world, and we must put on the right display under all circumstances so that we are trying to avoid that deep sense of being shamed because heaven forbid that anyone should actually see any imperfection in us. So we can become stunningly critical and judgmental on ourselves and on others because we're driven from toxic shame. Or like I said, we can go the other way. We can become chronic underfunctioners, finding it very difficult to get any of our element of our life together, relationships incessantly falling apart, losing jobs, chronic addiction-based issues. I mean, you can certainly have addiction-based issues on the other side of the spectrum too. But we're feeling less than compared to others. I don't do this as good. I don't earn as much as you. I'm not as good as you, I'm not as attractive as you, I'm not as clever as you. All of these really painful comparisons that normally end up that we are on the wrong side of that comparison. And again, we're taken further and further from genuine esteem and genuine value because toxic shame leaves us feeling as if we are wrong. And so we need to challenge that. We need to come back into connecting with our sense of enoughness. We need to come into a place where we know that innately we are valuable and precious, and this has nothing to do with what we do or don't do well or poorly. And also, again, we're separating, we're reclaiming our identity, and we're keeping the feelings of shame, we're placing them back where they belong, which is as a feeling, and we're reclaiming our identity as someone of innate worth and value, and so this can begin to really greatly change the way we do life. One of the things that allows shame to survive is that shame hides. It makes us want to withdraw and retract ourselves from people and activities, and we need sometimes to be able to fight that urge. I know with certainly doing these kind of YouTube series and my podcast series, the amount of shame that came up, the fear, the worry about being attacked, and the fear about being attacked is that I'll feel great shame when somebody belittles my ideas or proves how wrong I am or makes me look illogical, and I feel so foolish and humiliated because why didn't I see that this person is pointing out? And we've got to be able to find space where we can go, I acknowledge all that within myself, and lovingly I'm still going to do it anyway because I don't want to be the kind of person who feels toxically wrong and shame-based. And so for me, part of this whole process around doing clips like this and the podcast series was gently challenging shame and being able to say, okay, I'm having a shame attack, I'm feeling burning hot and bright red, and I've got that churning in my stomach, and I'm going to do this anyway with love. I'm not shaming myself for having a shame attack. I'm not swinging into anger and rage as a sense of false empowerment. Oh, how could you? Aren't we done with this yet? I'm being compassionate, I'm being nurturing, I'm talking to myself in a gentle, supportive way. Hello, shame attack. Oh, here we go again. I've got this feeling of shame going on in me. Okay, I can observe it, and very lovingly, I know my intention is to put myself out into the world, to learn to be more vulnerable, to show myself. And so with love for me and with compassion for me, I'm going to do it anyway. and progressively, if we can continue to front up and do the best we can, and we disabuse ourselves of the idea that it has to be perfect, then bit by bit, we come more and more back into that sense of being connected to our enoughness, connected to our innate value, and our sense of beingness. We're coming back to beingness and presence, rather than I value myself off what I do or I don't do, and I shame myself based off what I do or I don't do and how well I perceived I've done those things, rather than I'm just connected innately to my value and my worth, and from there, let's see how that informs action. So, there's nothing wrong with wanting to look fit and healthy and fabulous and wanting to dress well and have good things. We're not saying that any of that is wrong, but what we're looking at is what's the driver behind that. Because if we're driven from a place of innate wrongness and a sense that we're not enough, we're just going to keep trying to achieve and keep trying to acquire, and we're still going to end up fearful, empty, and anxious. Rather than when we are acquiring and aspiring from a place of healthy presence, then we are able to embrace a more complete sense of life. We're able to have better quality relationships. We're not also in our relationships putting up walls to avoid being shamed by others, or attracting in people who really are very effective at shaming us. We're learning to sit with our shame. We're learning to nurture it and embrace it and move forward anyway. Because sometimes what we find is people do what we call hot potatoing shame. I have a shame attack, maybe because my boss yelled at me, so straight away I'm looking to hand that on because I don't want to be sitting with that feeling. So I'm going to be looking for someone to yell at or belittle or judge, so that I can move that shame on and give it to somebody else. Maybe we've had the experience where the boss has yelled at us at work. We come home, one of our children has left their bike in the driveway, so we come in raging at the child, so because we're looking to kind of go, I don't want this, you take that. And then the child becomes kind of bewildered or feels shame and embarrassment and a sense of unfairness over the completely disproportionate response to the bike in the driveway, and then they go and find a younger sibling and look to hand on to them, and then the younger sibling goes and tries to find the cat or the dog, and around we go. Rather than as adults, we're sitting with the pain, we're acknowledging it, we're nurturing it, we're processing it through, and then from there, we're making different choices or having different responses in our relationship. Toxic shame is just, so painful to feel, and so, but we have to be prepared to be able to sit in that. We are adults. It can feel raw and enveloping, but that's because we've probably got carried shame from our childhood, and we're not going to die of shame. It won't kill us. It might feel like it will, but it won't. And so if we can have the courage to sit with it, process it, be compassionate and loving for self regardless of that experience, then bit by bit it dissolves. And like I said, what begins to emerge is more this sense that we can reconnect now to our enoughness, to our presence. We can start to be seen in the world. But if we're waiting for shame to go away before we start to be seen, gee, I would love it if it happened that way, but it doesn't. We have to find a strategy and a method for talking ourselves through the experience, acknowledging it, but going forward anyway. So I hope this episode on embracing shame has helped to give you some insights. It's a massive area. It's so pervasive in our culture. There's so much elements of shaming and judgmentalism in our culture, and in the cultures that we're exposed to. So we come across this a lot, and like I said, we really are well served when we're developing workable strategies for being able to sit in our own, but also not take it on when others try to hot potato us and go, no, thank you, that's not mine, that's yours to deal with, I'm not taking that on for you. And then, as I say, we can have better, more high quality relationships. We can embrace both the things that we do well in life and just we can embrace our ordinariness, and we can really be cherish our ordinariness rather than feeling like we have to knock it out the park 24/7. Otherwise, we experience shame, or we plummet into worm-like subhuman behaviors if we're doing the other side of toxic shame. And we don't want to be swinging the polarity. We want to find a healthy place where we can really come into and embrace our healthy esteem, not driven by these things. So I hope this episode has given you some things to think about and is of value. If you want to kind of reach out and connect with me further, I do private consultations, both face-to-face and online. I do in-house and public-based trainings on all kinds of communication dynamics and relationship issues. And you can also reach me at the website emergencetraining.com.au. I hope you've enjoyed the content. Please download and subscribe to the channel because it helps with reach, and I'm really passionate about helping people with their relationship skills for business and personal life. So I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Till then, bye.